The Wasilla City Council meeting is called to order. The time is 6 p.m. Before we begin, council, please put away all cell phones. If you have personal business to attend to during the meeting, please move for a recess. If you're participating telephonically, please mute your phone unless speaking. Also, when speaking, please state your name for those streaming the meeting. As a reminder to all attendees, this meeting is being streamed live. The camera is located directly in the back of the council chambers above the clock. Madam Deputy Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
Here.
Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Vilak.
Here.
Councilmember Rubio.
Here.
There is a quorum, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Smolden, would you lead us, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item of business is approval of the agenda. Are there changes to the agenda?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Gray.
just a note. I do plan to ask for executive session to discuss the labor contract. And as a question for you or the clerk, IM 2306, the monthly financial reports, I do have some questions on that. Would you prefer me just to ask those questions during communications, or do I need to move that to new business?
Move it to new business,
So,
please.
if we could move that to new business, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Is there, I need a motion to approve the agenda as moved.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Brown, I move that we accept the agenda with the amendments.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Rubio seconds.
Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We're now at special orders of the day. I will read the proclamation recognizing Telecommunicators Week. City of Wasilla Proclamation recognizing National Telecommunicators Week. Whereas National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week is held annually during the second week of April to honor telecommunications personnel for their commitment, service, and sacrifice. And whereas 911 centers, including emergency communications centers, public safety answering points, public safety communications center, emergency operations center, and other public safety command centers are a critical component of emergency communications and provide critical life-saving emergency services to the public. And whereas the safety of our emergency medical service responders, police officers, and firefighters are dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from the citizens who telephone the MATCOM Public Safety Dispatch Center. And whereas public safety dispatchers are the single vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information and ensuring their safety. Whereas MATCOM Public Safety Dispatchers are in charge of identifying a caller's needs calmly and proactively, dispatching law enforcement officers or emergency responders in a timely and efficient manner, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And whereas this week is a time to celebrate and thank telecommunications personnel across the nation who serve our communities, citizens, and public safety personnel, for the public safety system would not operate without them. Now therefore I, Glenda D. Ledford, Mayor of Wasilla, hereby proclaim April 9th, 2023 through April 15th, 2023 as National Telecommunicators Week in the City of Wasilla in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our city and our citizens safe. Jacob, would you come forward, please? This is Jacob Butcher, who is the supervisor for MATCOM. I am honored to present you with this proclamation.
About the background.
Thank you for all that you do and all that you do. Okay. Jacob, would you come forward again? And I'm going to turn it over to Jacob.
Is this on?
That one's already on.
I'd like to ask Rhonda Phillips to come forward. She's one of our dispatch supervisors. Got a letter here for you, Rhonda. This award and letter of commendation are to recognize your life-saving efforts that jumped into action on the afternoon of January 24th, 2023. Having just left shift from MATCOM and being among the first on scene to a vehicle versus pedestrian collision, your quick action to render aid to the pedestrian who is unconscious and not breathing upon your arrival resulted in recovery of spontaneous circulation. Although it was not through your line of work, the ability to process the stress of the moment and render aid was undoubtedly foreshadowed by your experience as a first responder in public safety dispatch. MATCOM and the City of Wasilla would like to honor you with the respect and gratitude these actions deserve, as you have selflessly committed to serving your community. So I just want to let you guys know she had just left shift and was actually across the street and witnessed a vehicle versus pedestrian accident. Was first on scene to the young lady that had been hit by the car and rendered aid to get her breathing and got her back basically to life. So it wasn't through her line of work, but she jumped into action quickly and was able to get these life-saving measures in place for the young girl in our community. We would also like to present you with this plaque for the wall.
Thank you. I thought I was here to present an award. I wasn't expecting it.
Tricked her.
There you go.
Thank you.
Rhonda, we want to thank you for your loyalty to the City of Wasilla and to MATCOM. Thank you so much for the work that you do.
My pleasure.
Okay, we are now at Commission and Agencies reports. Office of the Governor, Carbon Initiative presentation. Todd Smolden, would you come forward, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not quite sure how to follow that. This definitely won't be as life-saving or as exciting, but I do want to thank you. I reached out a little while back and asked if I could take some of your valuable council time to present on the governor's carbon initiative. I know that it's been heard in several hearings now, both in the House and Senate, and so some of you might be more or less familiar with it than others. There is an 8-page slide presentation here. I'm not going to read over all of it. I'm just going to try to hit the highlights since I know you are busy and have a lot of business to attend to, but I put it together with the hopes that you'd be able to kind of look at it on your own, and others who can pull it off of your website, constituents who might want to look at it can do that as well. And then my contact information is on the last page. So if anybody, both council members and constituents want more information, they can reach out to me and I'm happy to give them more information. So if I can work the technology here. Oh, there we go. So first of all, I think it's important that people understand that what we're talking about here is monetizing CO2, which is the same gas that we put in our soda. It's been liquefied safely for many years. Some people see it as a potential climate changer with levels of CO2 as potentially causing climate change. The governor in his initiative isn't really making an environmental statement. What he is saying is that there is the opportunity to monetize or earn revenue as a state because of how people feel about CO2 in the atmosphere. And one of those ways is through companies, corporations taking advantage of the federal 45Q tax credits, not a tax, but a credit. And I know some people will say, well, if one person is credited from taxes, that means that somebody else has to pay taxes to make up that credit. So I understand you consider it a subsidy. But there's a lot of voluntary carbon limitations that corporations and companies are also putting on themselves. So it's not just federal incentives, there are also corporate, other countries that are looking to reduce their CO2 output because of carbon goals that they've set for themselves. And one big issue with this is investment, large investors and financiers who also have CO2 goals and carbon neutral goals when they're looking at what projects they're going to invest in. So again, it's not really an environmental statement, it's more about a statement of the times and what people are demanding. And so this has created an emergent market in CO2 capture and sequestration. I love this. I know it's very busy, but it's like the perfect graphic that just kind of explains the CO2 cycle and what people are looking at. If you look in the upper left corner, you'll see what most of us hopefully learned early on in science class, which is that plants eat CO2 and they convert it into oxygen, and we get to breathe it. It's an amazing thing that the planet does, and our human interaction with plants and carbon, CO2, and oxygen. And then if you look at the other side, the right side of the screen, what you'll see is that this idea of capturing CO2, and then you can put it in pipelines in liquid form and then store it underground. The governor has two pieces of legislation. One is to use surface sequestration. Companies, entities will pay the state of Alaska to set aside portions of land and portions of offshore water where kelp or other things can be grown, and they're designed to capture the CO2, essentially take CO2 out of the environment. And people will pay money to the state to set aside land or create something like a kelp bed for the purpose of converting CO2 into oxygen or taking it out of the atmosphere. The other piece, which is a little bit more complex and will take more time to develop, is the storage aspect. So that's a separate piece of legislation. And then on the bottom left, you'll see that this CO2 is actually used for a lot of things as well. Fertilizer, they're starting to make like plastics out of it, cutlery, all kinds of things, because they're capturing a product, and so entrepreneurs are looking at, well, how can we use this? We're capturing it. Can we turn it into something useful? And so just real quickly on this, the carbon offsets is the idea of setting aside land or developing land or offshore to capture or sequester the carbon, convert it, take it out of the atmosphere. And I'll just kind of let you read that on your own at your leisure so that you don't take too much time. But the other piece is the capture and storage. There are a lot of safeguards in place here in terms of who is liable for the CO2. Remember, it's in liquid form, it's stored deep under the ground. Wells would be capped. There's no evidence of any seismic problems with it. Essentially what you're doing is you're taking a liquid gas and you're filling the fissures where oil or natural gas used to be. So you put it into depleted oil and gas basins or coal deposits that might not be in a position where you could extract them, very difficult coal deposits. So that's the idea behind the storage aspect. And I know that people, if you don't have this in front of you, you can't really read this, but the purpose of this slide is to show you kind of the voluntary goals that the North Slope producers are setting for themselves in terms of reducing their CO2 output. So part of this is because of the 45Q. Part of it is because corporate boards are interested in reducing their CO2 output. And part of it is that they've, in order for investing, a lot of projects are asking them to reduce their CO2 output when they produce. AKLNG is an example of this. Some people are suggesting that the financing for that won't be possible unless some of the CO2 is taken out of the gas at the point of extraction before it's shipped down the pipeline. Also, Repsol and Santos and the Pica project are looking at ways that they can reduce CO2 to make that project happen. So very, very real voluntary goals established by producers in Alaska. I like this slide because most people, they kind of associate CO2 or environmental type legislation with, states that are more maybe on the left side of the political spectrum. If you'll notice something interesting about all these states that are pursuing this type of legislation, every single one of them voted for President Trump in the last election. I like to say the joke, look at all those blue states pursuing carbon legislation, and people say, well, those are red states. Well, no, they're blue. They're blue on the map, but politically they're actually red states. So it's kind of interesting. You look at Texas and Oklahoma, Louisiana, Wyoming, North Dakota. Why are these states pursuing this? Well, because they are oil and gas states for the most part, and they have depleted basins where they can store CO2. So that's why you see them pursuing this legislation. And just kind of final here, I think it's important for people to understand that, again, this is an emerging market that has revenue potential, and it's not, the governor's not creating a tax. It's voluntary. There's no compelled, reason for people to have to sequester or reduce their CO2. Ultimately, the goal is to diversify the revenue stream for the state of Alaska. And I think that diversification and a more consistent revenue stream also helps you at the local level. I know there are often projects and things, funding that you ask for the state, and the more diversified and consistent our revenue flow can be, the easier you can plan as well as you go through your budget process. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to try to answer them. Councilmember Graham might give me a run for my money, but I'm willing to take a shot. I knew it was coming.
Thanks, good information here, Todd. So we're looking at state lands, so really two questions. So the area that is tundra, which is, undevelopable tundra, in the northern half of the state or northern, third of the state. I mean, is that workable as being able to lease for terrestrial sequestration? I mean, does that qualify? And number two, if forested lands are selected for this terrestrial sequestration, how long is that contract? I mean, at some point, we decide that the world's running out of lumber and logging becomes back in vogue. Is there a way to reverse that and use that state resource for logging?
Well, thanks, through the mayor. You know, I would say on the tundra question, I haven't heard about tundra. Taiga, black spruce forests, of course, timber areas, but perhaps the greatest the greatest source of revenue from the offsets is offshore, and also apparently wetlands are very good at sequestering and to be used as offsets. I was speaking to the governor recently last week, and he said he was talking to someone who believes wetlands actually have more potential for these offsets than timberlands, and which I thought was kind of amazing. So I would just say that Alaska is so large, and that there are a lot of different options for offsets. And the legislation has a 55-year maximum for the land use. That's standard with our leases, 55 years, and then it can be reevaluated. The interesting thing about a lot of this, though, is that you don't just let it sit. So when let's say a company leases land, timberland, they actually have an incentive to make sure that's a healthy forest. And part of it being a healthy forest is harvesting. So just because it is set aside doesn't mean that it won't be touched, doesn't mean it can't generate revenue. The state can participate in this directly. The legislation also allows like third-party participation, where the state is just collecting revenue while a third party manages the offset land. But the offshore has a lot of potential as well. So it's not just timberland.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson?
Todd, as this legislation is moving through the legislative session, is there costs associated to it that the state is going to have to front to begin with on the fruition of this legislation in order to make this happen? If so, how much?
So if the legislation doesn't pass, there's no cost, because the only reason why there would be positions added in DNR is if the legislation passed, because it would be enabling legislation. What I heard today in a committee hearing, which was pretty still kind of getting some specific numbers, but I think there would be 2 DNR positions added. They anticipate that the revenue generated when a lease was sold, so to speak, and I'm using that terminology kind of loosely, but could be about 10 million. So it's definitely a revenue generator, not a cost to the state, minimal cost. The other piece is that other parties do the studies and things like that on the state land. So the state of Alaska would not be paying for that.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there any other places around the country that's similar to Alaska that Alaska's looking at as an example who has already tried this or doing this?
Well, through the mayor, I think the map that I showed you there shows there are a number of states that already have some of these projects in place. The thing that we don't have ESG policy or a tax structure in place. That's not what we're doing. We would be opening up a service for those who are trying to meet those offset goals. So some people have looked at like the California credit offset market as an example, but it's not a real good example because that's a compelled market. California passed policy that compels businesses to reduce their CO2 output. The Michigan example is a little closer to what we're doing, but the reality is that Alaska has more coastline than the rest of the lower 48 combined, and we're 1/5 the size of the United States. So it's difficult to compare what the potential of Alaska would be to other places.
Todd, I've heard that if this is not passed and we don't have a plan, that it will affect oil exploration on the slope. True or false?
Oh, you're gonna make this difficult for me, Madam Mayor. I would say that Repsol and Santos, the possibility of PICA moving forward is much better if this passes. For that project, they want to do carbon offsets and they want to take advantage of carbon credits. They will either buy those and do that in Alaska, or they will buy them and do it somewhere else so that they can say that they are reducing their CO2 output as a company, as a corporation, to meet their goals. So I'm not going to say it would stop the PICA project, but they're either going to pay someone else to offset their CO2, or they can do that in Alaska, and the state of Alaska could get that revenue. But I think it's a great question, because what I'm hearing from people is that somehow we're contributing to an ESG, policy, or we're encouraging ESG through this legislation. The way I would answer that is people are going to reduce their CO2 output and buy these offsets, whether we participate in it or not, because it's important to them. So we can either set it up as enabling legislation and take advantage of that, or we can let somebody else earn the revenue.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
We will now hear from Public Works Director on the Airport Advisory Commission. Eric.
Thank you, Mayor. On March 16th, we had our March AAC meeting. The main item of business was to talk about Resolution 2301, which recommended fee increases at the airport. We had a lively public discourse with 9 or 10 registered commenters, but more than a dozen people in attendance. The minutes are in your packet, and there's an IM that we'll discuss later in the meeting tonight about that process. But we heard from the public about their opinions on the rate increase, and the commission members voted to forward that to support that resolution of fee increases. The minutes have a breakdown in it on the rates they wanted to talk about and the proposed rates that they had. The public commenters also took the time to commend the streets and airport crew for the ongoing snow removal. We've heard a lot of compliments this year about how well they're doing with the snow removal at the airport this year. But as I said, the main focus of the meeting was to talk about rate increases, and that information is in the packet and in the minutes for the meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Graham.
Thanks. Eric, a couple things. You said we were going to talk about the IM later on. IMs usually aren't talked about. They're just passed along. Is there something that you'd like to say on that? And then number two, when I read the IM, it talked about a upcoming study or a study in process from HDL. So how did they figure out rates prior to that study being published, or did they have enough information to make that work?
Yeah, so I apologize for my misspeaking about talking about the IM later. The IM explains kind of our process with the rate increase. I guess you could say that the commissioners and I have been working through a worksheet that I created, which is in the minutes packet, where we looked at similar airports and what rates they charge. And we also talked about the commissioner's experience with the aviation field and where they felt the market rates were for comparable airports to our own. And so through the public meeting process, there was a dialogue about the comfort level of the commissioners and their experiences on where the rate should be. So through that spreadsheet that's in the IM packet, they proposed and voted on different rates for different fees, and that is where the resolution of support came from. Your question about the HDL study, one of the things I mentioned in our last meeting in March was that HDL has secured Northern Economics to provide us with rate information. And so I'll just read you part of it. They said that they'll provide a financial assessment of the airport to determine daily, quarterly, and annual operating expenses and revenues to the airport and include different rate structures. My proposal to the AAC was that we they wait to vote on a resolution until they've seen that report. They decided not to do that. And so in the IM, I'm just conveying to the council that that report is coming too, and that I'm going to bring all that information to the council when a rate increase is requested.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, Eric. So back in December, there were discussions about the airport expansion, sort of taking a dogleg here from the rate increases, which we'll talk about later. Has there been any progress moving forward in specific proposals, funding for the expansion? And if so, can you give us a little briefing on where we are with that today? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Johnson. So I think your question touches on where we are with the master planning process. Yes, so we have been working with HDL to identify users or potential users of the airport that we want to interview, that we need to interview, to gather current uses and near-term uses. If we can identify user groups that are at the airport or will come to the airport in a very short order, we need to know what airplanes they'll use. We're trying to make a case with the FAA that we warrant extension to the runway length based on size and weight of airplanes. So we are finishing up those interviews. The HDL had hoped to attend the April AAC meeting and share the data they've collected. They don't feel they're ready to do that yet. They want to circle wagons one more time and find every user that we could possibly find. So we're projecting now to have an update in May. So we're just trying to capture all of the data we can from all the users that are there or could be there in the near future. And out of that interview process, we're building a case for the expansion requests that the council has, that the AAC has. And so the expansion desire hasn't changed much. What we're trying to do is use data to show that it's reasonable for FAA to agree with us as we move forward. So we haven't brought the last expansion CIP list back to the data we collected during the interviews yet. It's not quite done yet, but we'll be bringing those together. Meanwhile, Northern Economics is going to get started on their review as well, using the data that we have and using the data that HDL has collected. So there's multiple tasks happening at the moment right now.
Madam Mayor, follow-on question then. So it was my understanding back in the fall that the FAA actually had proposed the money for the runway expansion. And is what you're saying then is they have not allocated that money yet, or they have not approved the project and we're still cycling back and forth between the city and the FAA? Is that correct?
My understanding on funding approval is that the the apron expansions have been allocated. I don't know of runway expansion monies that have been allocated by or approved by the FAA. We have a capital improvements project list we outline what we want to do. That's being refreshed during this master planning study. And I believe that we're still making the case to FAA that that expansion is warranted with their monetary support. When the refresh starts, they have us reevaluate all of those projects. So the aprons are moving ahead. I don't know of any expansion monies that have been approved just yet.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Eric. We'll now hear from the Deputy Administrator on the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Planning Commission met on the 14th of March. Two items they discussed. One was short-term rentals. In overall, the commission members did not have a lot of issues with the regulations the way that they are, but they did have some suggestions about some of the submittal items that are listed when you're doing an application. Those include the need to provide a proof of insurance naming the city for short-term rental, business license, and septic inspection. So the staff will bring changes forward to review for the Planning Commission at their June meeting. The second item was reviewing and updating the permit process for Title 16. That will continue tomorrow on the 11th. The resolution that they're going to discuss is how to really look at the staff review time and bring some consistency to the process and some clarity. Our code seems to have a lot of ambiguity and some language in there that lends itself to decisions being made that we just need to tighten up a little bit. And so we'll be talking about that tomorrow night on the 11th. They will also be reviewing Resolution 2304, which is the language around the application process. And then we have a conditional use permit from Walmart to expand about 6,300 square feet for their online order customer pickup area, as well as dog kennels and mobile food vendors. So if you know anybody that is in the dog kennel business or mobile food vendors or short-term rentals, now would be the time for them to come put their input, give us some input. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Crystal. The Deputy Administrator, please continue with an update from the Landscaping Standards Review Committee.
So April 3rd was their final meeting. On April 17th, they will have a resolution to adopt those, the changes, and then May 9th, the Planning Commission will do their final commission meeting and make sure that the package is approved and ready for your review. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Crystal. We are on to public participation. No. We do not have a representative from Burchell High School here today, so we'll move on to public participation. There's one ordinance and one resolution scheduled for public hearing this evening. Madam Deputy Clerk, please read the title of the ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's ordinance serial number 2311, amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by accepting and appropriating the Matsu Trails and Parks Foundation grant in the amount of $35,000 for a pathway paving project at Idita Park.
Okay. The public hearing on ordinance serial number 23-11 is open. Anyone who would like to testify, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name, and you have 3 minutes. Seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance serial number 2311?
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance serial number 2311.
Is there a second?
I second that.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Vlock to adopt ordinance serial number 2311. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Quick question, please. If this particular ordinance passes, when would we see a start date for the pathway to be built?
Eric, would you speak to that, please?
Absolutely. At this time, we are weighing whether or not we'll get the best price if we add it to the spring paving or the summer paving. But it'll be paved by the end of this summer for sure. We have options for both, and we're just trying to make sure we choose the most economic way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
Okay, is there further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Deputy Clerk, please take a roll call vote on the motion.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard, how do you vote?
Yes. Yes.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Vilek?
Yes.
Councilmember Rubio?
Yes.
The motion to adopt ordinance serial number 2311 passes unanimously.
We're doing 2310, is that new business?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, Madam Deputy Clerk, please read the title of the resolution.
Resolution serial number 2310, providing an opportunity for review and public comment pursuant to Wasilla Municipal Code 3.90.085C on the current collective bargaining agreement between the City of Wasilla and the Laborers International Union of North America, Local 341, and authorizing administration to enter into negotiations with the Laborers International Union of North America, Local 341 for a new contract.
The public hearing on resolution serial number 2310 is open. Anyone who would like to testify, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Seeing no one, public hearing is closed. Is there a motion to adopt resolution serial number 2310?
So moved by Councilman Johnson.
Is there a second?
Councilman Graham.
It's been moved by Councilmember Johnson and seconded by Councilmember Graham to adopt resolution serial number 2310. Is there discussion? Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, just a question. Earlier, Councilman Graham had asked for an executive session. Does that pertain to this particular resolution?
Yes, it does. It'll, much like we did with the resolution for 302.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none, Deputy Madam Clerk, please take a roll call vote on the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Rubio, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilmember Vilek?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard?
Yes.
The motion to adopt resolution serial number 2310 passes unanimously.
We are now at persons to be heard, a time for members of the public to share their views with the council. This is not a question and answer period or a time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the council or administration. Miss Eileen.
Eileen Falkenstein, representing Wasilla Area Seniors Incorporated. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Just a couple things that we're working on right now. Of course, our Meals on Wheels fundraiser is coming up in June. And what we are working on right now is donations for our online auction, which will take place May 6th through 19th. We've already gotten several really great items to be bid upon, such as family pass to Ski Talk, a family pass to the Alaska Zoo, tickets to Mahays Gorge Adventures, and some dinner gift cards for families to use. We are also looking for anyone that may have something that they would like to donate to the auction, be it a craft item, be it a dinner somewhere, something like that. The auction raises a lot of funds for our Meals on Wheels fundraiser, and we look forward to seeing lots of participants in our online auction. We are also having an indoor yard sale for spring cleaning, It is open to the public on April 29th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Wazi. So if you'd like to peruse our indoor yard sale, please come and check it out. Other than that, Wazi just continues to serve the seniors in the valley with Meals on Wheels, congregate lunches, transportation. We just acquired 2 new vehicles with a grant that we received from the Richard and Diane Block Foundation, which allowed us to purchase 2 2023 Subaru Foresters for transporting seniors to various things that they need to get to, because transportation for seniors in the valley is limited. They can contact our folks at Wazi and arrange for transportation wherever they need to go when it's available and it's affordable. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and talk to the council at this time? Seeing no one. We are now at the consent agenda. Madam Deputy Clerk, please read title of the items for approval under the consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The items on the consent agenda are the regular meeting minutes of March 13th, 2023. There's one ordinance up for public hearing on April 24th, 2023. That's ordinance serial number 2313, amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by appropriating $80,000 for Alaska Remote Seller Sales Tax Commission fees with an equal offsetting increase to sales tax revenue. There's one resolution for approval, resolution serial number 2311, in support of having a Social Security office located in the Matanuska-Susitna Borough to provide safer and less stressful experiences for our citizens. And lastly, one action memorandum recommended for approval. That's AM number 2309, contract award to CCI Industrial Services in the amount of $312,041 for Spruce and East Susitna Reservoir coating repairs. Those are the items on tonight's consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
So moved by Councilman Johnson.
Is there a second?
Second that.
It's been moved by Councilmember Johnson and seconded by Councilmember Vlock to approve the consent agenda as read. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. There are no items under unfinished business. We don't have any items. Yes, we have one item. Madam Deputy Clerk, please read.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's item number 2308, presenting revisions to the City of Wasilla budget calendar for fiscal year 2024.
Okay.
And there's no need for a motion. This is for informational purposes.
Okay. Mr. Graham, you pulled this.
Which item was that again?
On the budget calendar.
I thought I pulled 2306, which is the financial reports. No. We never questioned the mayor's judgment on the budget calendar.
Sorry about that.
So, given the miscommunication, Madam Mayor, I would like to amend the agenda to have IM 2306 moved to new business.
Okay.
Is there any objection?
Any objection?
Okay.
Seeing none.
That's IM 2306, monthly financial reports for the period ending February 28th, 2023, to include the month-to-date expenditure report and disbursements greater than $10,000.
Okay. Mr. Graham.
Madam Mayor, I move to accept the IM 2306. I do have comments.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Johnson to accept IM number 2306. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor, quick question when I'm looking at this, Joan. I look at looks like under CIP fund, and I look at Public Works, Cultural and recreation services, the museum and the library have pretty extraordinarily high percentages of unspent or unallocated funds. Are there projects associated with those where we plan to expend those funds? And so I guess it really goes more to Public Works or perhaps further down the line. But I mean, at the library, we haven't really talked about any big CIP projects coming up, but there's $30,000 in there obviously for a specific project. And for the museum, there's $141,000 plus in there. Can I get some information on what's going on with those?
Councilmember Graham, through the mayor. So for the library, I think this relates to the residual funding for the expansion of the parking lot. And I know they had about 30,000 left of sales tax dollars that were to be used for nothing but capital pavement projects. So I think that project has been completed, so you can expect to see that balance roll off in the next budget.
Okay. And for the museum, $141,000. And if you want to defer that to the next meeting, that's fine.
I'd like to do that to be accurate.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Is there a,
No further discussion. How's that? I'll shut my mouth.
okay, thank you. But is there any further discussion on this motion? If not, is there an objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes. We are on to commission minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Under communications, there are 2 informational memorandums and 4 sets of commission meeting minutes. IM number 23-07, update on Wasilla Airport rate increases proposed by the Airport Advisory Commission. And IM number 2308, presenting revisions to the City of Wasilla budget calendar for fiscal year 2024. 4 sets of commission meeting minutes, the Airport Advisory Commission minutes for March 16, 2023, Parks and Recreation Commission minutes for March 8, 2023, Planning Commission minutes for March 14, 2023, and finally, Wasilla Landscape Standards Review Committee minutes for March 6, 2023.
Thank you, ma'am. We are on to audience comments, 3 minutes per person. It's a time for members of the public to share their views with the council. This is not a question and answer period or a time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the council or administration. Is there anyone present who would like to address the city council? Seeing no one, we will close audience comments and go to comments for the mayor, clerk, attorney, and council. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a friendly reminder to Councilmembers Sullivan, Leonard, Graham, Johnson, Brown, and Vlock that you are confirmed to attend the State of the City Luncheon hosted by the Greater Wasilla Chamber of Commerce at Evangelos Restaurant on April 18th. Check-in begins at 11:30 a.m. and the program begins at noon. Deputy Mayor Vlock will be speaking.
Thank you. Madam Attorney.
No comments, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No comment.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
No comment, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As expected, I do have a few comments. For the Parks and Rec Commission, you know, we get the minutes, but we don't have an opportunity to comment on those. Are you aware, are there any plans to upgrade the gravel parking lot north of the Menard Center. I mean, as attendance at events grows, that parking lot just becomes a deeper and deeper mud hole because the grading of the parking lot isn't such that you can have adequate drainage there, particularly in the wintertime with the spring thaw cycle, and the fact that we just haven't done any work on that parking lot other than run a grader over it to improve the surface there so it is less muddy. Is Parks and Rec looking at that at all, or?
Director
Powell,
Bell.
Recreational Services Director. So the Park and Rec Commission is not involved in that. I am in my role. So last year, I don't have the resolution number, but there originally was $250,000 slated for a pavilion to be built at the Menard Center, of which we came to you and changed that project to parking lot expansion. So we have approximately $240,000. Plans have been drawn. We are waiting for the thaw to get to it. And the intent right now will be the north lot, as we call it. The bleachers are scheduled to be removed by May 10th. The sand will be redistributed or moved off property. Then we will cut in and remove a certain part of the trees right on the south side of there to clear that, and then everything will be graded, graveled, electrical will be put in with light fixtures, with the intent that all that will be completed hopefully by the end of this summer. Then we'll come forward in a future date regarding paving all of that. So
Okay.
It's in the plans, it's being worked on as we speak, in different parts.
And I appreciate that, but after the last couple of events, my phone rang more than a couple dozen times from people saying, hey, what are we gonna do about that? And so I'm just following up on that. I appreciate the information. And secondly, I wanted to remind everybody, even though it's a few weeks out, DEA National Drug Take Back Day is going to be in April on the Saturday the 22nd. The city partners with Fred Meyer's to use their parking lot where folks can drop off unused prescription medications. But it is worth noting that you can drop off any pills at all. They don't have to be in a bottle. They can be in a plastic bag. They can be in your hand and you drop them in the box. Nobody's taking names, numbers, photographs, anything like that. I'm sure everybody is well aware of the massive influx of fentanyl that our nation and our state is receiving at this point. And folks are dying. It's not just kids, it's adults too, on these recreational drugs or where they think they're getting one thing and it turns out just a small amount of fentanyl is enough to put someone, in respiratory arrest. And if there's no way for somebody to be on scene to help them restore their breathing, that's it. So please, please, please spread the word. DEA Drug Take Back Day on April 22nd. Anything at all. They don't accept syringes, unfortunately, but go from there. And to follow up on that with the chief, I hate to wake you up over there, but in Palmer they have a drug take back. I think it's a big barrel out behind the police station or the fire station. Excuse me. Could we maybe look into establishing a program like that for Wasilla, where people could turn in unused or unwanted medications at times other than the biannual drug take-back days? Could you take a look at that and see, maybe report in a future meeting what that might involve?
I can do that.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Graham, if I'm not mistaken, cars will take your unused medication. And maybe Fred Meyer's?
Just cars, the pharmacy.
Yeah, they'll take your unused.
Thank
And you
you.
can also, at Fred Meyer's in Palmer and the Willow Public Library at the same time, they are set up to take unused medication. Okay, Councilmember Johnson.
No further comments, thank you.
Councilmember Rubio.
No comment.
Councilmember Velock.
No comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. And Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, at this time, I move we enter executive session to discuss items, public knowledge of which may be detrimental to the city of Wasilla, specifically to discuss labor negotiations with the employee bargaining unit for
341.
341, thank you. Laborers, 341. Persons present in the executive meeting would be city council members, the mayor, and the attorney, and I would think the deputy administrator would be appropriate to be there as well. Oh, and the finance director, I apologize.
Yeah. Scott needs to be in
Scott, sure, you bet. I'm not even sure what you're talking about, Scott. But whatever it is, Scott should be there.
there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway. Okay.
So that's my motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
It has been made, the motion's been made to enter into executive session by Mr. Graham. Yes, please.
To the attorney and Colleen and Councilmember Sullivan Leonard, is it okay if we call you on your cell phones?
Yes, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This is Holly. Yes, that works for me.
Thank you, Holly. It has been made, the motion has been made by Councilmember Johnson and seconded by Councilmember, Graham, and seconded by Councilmember Johnson to enter to executive session. Is there objection to the motion? We have entered executive session at 7:01. Everybody, staff who was not invited in, you are free to go. Thank you. Is there a second?
Rubio seconds.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Rubio to exit the committee, the executive session. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, we are out of executive session at 8:10. With no further business at hand, I'm adjourning the meeting unless objection is raised. Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned at 8:10 p.m.
That's pretty good. You didn't even look at me to see if I had an objection.
All right, it wouldn't matter. I wasn't listening.